A lot of times we see this in offers. Seller shall close out any and all open permits and code violations at seller's expense prior to closing. If you have the listing and you are allowing this in the contract without talking to me, without giving your seller legal advice from an attorney, then you're making a mistake, because this language leaves your seller open to an unknown liability. We have no idea what open permits are on the property. We have no idea if there are expired permits. We have no idea if there are code violations. We haven't run a municipal lien search yet, so we don't know any of that information. So if you're allowing this language to be in the contract and there is a code violation or an expired permit, you are locking your seller in to have to pay for that prior to closing. Otherwise, they're going to be in default. And we've seen code violations that are upwards of $50,000 with fines accruing every single day. That will potentially kill a closing and kill a transaction. And you guys don't want to do that. We want to be able to solve issues. And so if you see this, we need to change it. The reason why this language is being put into the additional terms is because of the inspection period of the contract. Section 12 talks about what happens with open and expired permits. And it says, if the buyer's inspection of the property identifies open or needed building permits, then the seller shall promptly deliver all plans, blah, 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 blah. And then we jump down to the last line here in 275. Seller shall not be required to expend or become obligated to expend any money. So what happened was, savvy buyers brokers and buyers attorneys realized that municipal lien searches never come in during the inspection period, and this is the only section that protects them. So they started adding this language to the additional terms that says the seller is required to close out open and expired permits, code violations, and they shifted the language in the contract over to be buyer friendly, because this language is very seller friendly. Seller doesn't really have to do anything, but the contract is assuming that we're finding this during the inspection period. So the contract is assuming, well, the buyer can just back out. Most title companies will not order a municipal lien search until the inspection period is over. So, and we may not have, most of the time we don't have it back before the inspection period is over, because the inspection period 7 to 10 days, and most municipalities are at least 5 business days to get a municipal lien search back. So in almost no scenario is the municipal lien search back for the inspection period. So if you're on the buyer side, you have to write something in the additional terms. And if we have buyer-friendly permit language and we have neutral permit language, and then the most seller-friendly permit language is just blank. So here is the example of our neutral language. If citations, open permits, and or violations are discovered after the inspection period and at or prior to closing, then the seller may elect to satisfy, close, or release such citations, open permits, or violations prior to the closing. If the seller elects not to do so, then the buyer can either accept the property or cancel the contract and be refunded the earnest money deposit, and the contract will be terminated. This is neutral because it says the seller doesn't have to do anything, but then if they choose not to, the buyer can cancel the contract. And that's basically what it says in section 12 anyway. It's just that we're extending the inspection period specifically for these items because we know that we're not going to determine the answer to it during the inspection period. From the listing side, if you get an offer that has permit language in it, you want to change it so that your seller is not entering into an unknown liability. And you want to change it to this, which is neutral, because you're giving the buyer a middle ground. And then this language allows us to be creative too, because the seller, if there is an issue and they say, well, I don't want to do anything, well, guess what? Next time they go to sell to a buyer, they have to disclose all these issues to them. So they may as well just work with the current buyer to resolve the situation and get it done and closed.